Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers at VMware. And today I'm joined by the Cloudian team. So welcome, John and Giorgio. Thanks a lot for attending, guys. Let's start with a brief round of introductions. John, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Guy. My name's John Brooks. I look after the service provider business with Cloudian here. I also have global responsibility for our VMware relationship. So I live and breathe the CSP community and the VCPP program that we work with.
Excellent. Thanks, John. And Giorgio, welcome.
Hello, I'm Giorgio. I'm a solutions architect for Cloudian. I am based out in Italy and I cover basically, let's say, the South and East European market. And today I will be showing you some details about the VMware integrations with Cloudian.
Thanks, Giorgio. And it's come quite a way. I mean, the partnership itself has come quite a way from, I think it was maybe about 5 years ago, we started this, John. And we've now got, full integration with Cloudian S3 Object Storage as a service via VCD self-service. And there's a bunch of new really cool use cases that we're going to talk about as we go through. But also, John, we're calling this the update for March 2023 because there is some slight changes in, the packaging and things like that. Can you just mention what they are in summary and why they'd be beneficial?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Guy. Some exciting stuff's been worked on within the Cloudian team and positioned with the VMware teams. So, one thing that we've always struggled with a little bit is kind of capex versus opex messaging, of course, and trying to bring kind of pricing parity. One thing we're doing is looking to repackage how we go to market through the program. Based on commitments, we are looking to kind of work on our discount structure and so on, based on additional commitments and so on. And the other thing is adding additional value into Hyperstore. I mean, Hyperstore is the leader in the S3 object market. I mean, that's a given. But actually, we've got some other interesting products in our portfolio which are adding to the bundle, namely a product called HyperIQ, which is an analytics and observability tool. It's a tool that you can use as a CSP to deliver more value to your customers. That's going to be added into the package. And also Object Lock. And Object Lock, if you're delivering backup as a service, as most of you will be, of course, Object Lock is that technology which enables immutability, which is ultimately delivering ransomware protection. We're looking to bundle both of those software products into the Hyperstore package. And as I say, based on commitments, look at kind of reducing cost.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. So more value from your Cloudian relationship with VMware, more offerings that you can provide to your tenants and at a better cost structure.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Look forward to hearing more about it.
Cool.
Giorgio, I'm just going to hand it over to you then. You've got the slides for today and take us through, if you wouldn't mind, the update itself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's talk about, first of all, the Cloudian Hyperstore use cases, so where you can use our object storage technology. And first of all, I want to start with why are we so successful in the market at the moment? And the first pillar, let's say, it's the fact that we are cloud native and we are one of the only, or let's say the object storage that started in the market proposing the S3 API on-premise with full compatibility to the S3 standard that runs and was born basically in the cloud. The other point, which is very important, I think, for our audience today, is that we are a service-ready architecture. So we can provide multi-tenancy, quality of service, billing out of the box inside our Hyperstore object storage. And integrating this with the vCloud object storage extension allows a service provider using the VMware solutions to basically have a unique environment to sell infrastructure as a service and storage as a service with our solution. The other point is also that our solution is great in security. We have the most important security certification right now on the market, and the security, we call it basically military grade. We are tested and we run in environments that are, let's say, that need higher security standards. And these are customers like governments, for example.
Yeah.
What are the key S3 use case nowadays present on the market? I would say the first of them is always backup. Like every customer that contacts us the first time is for doing backup storage with object storage. And we have a couple of alliances in this in this use case, Veeam, Commvault, Veritas, and Rubrik, for example. The other use case that to me it's very interesting in this slide is the file use case. So you can basically use NAS solutions that run on object storage and can tier folder data to object storage, or can actually do caching, provide data in NFS and SMB. But let's say the storage, the first tier of the storage is actually a caching device. All of the data are stored on the object storage technology. The other important use case, I think, is media and entertainment. We have a lot of customers in this space right now. And the principal point is that technically the S3 object storage now is the storage for any streaming service we use, like Netflix, for example, uses AWS, S3, Amazon Prime Video uses Amazon Web Services, of course. And some of our customers actually came to us to build a solution that in the same way allowed them to store a huge amount of videos and reference them when needed, or even provide them to their customer through our storage. So like providing a free or paid streaming service. The data analytics space, now it's becoming great. And I have a slide afterwards talking about also our relationship with VMware in this space on Greenplum. Going into much more details, as you can see, one of the principal use cases that let's say our service provider customers can do is basically provide storage services. One other interesting use case is that with the Cloudian solution, you can easily provide an hybrid cloud-enabled product, because each packet you create on our storage can be set up to tier data to an external cloud, to a public cloud, for example, AWS, Azure, or Google. And most importantly, in the hybrid cloud space, you can also run our solution on VMware Tanzu, for example. So you can containerize our infrastructure inside of Tanzu. In the data protection space, we work with Veeam, Rubrik, and Veritas and Commvault, as I said before. And three of these players, specifically Veeam, Veritas, Commvault, leverage also our object lock integration. So you can actually create a backup storage that is immutable. So no ransomware attack can ever modify your data, or let's say prevent the fact that you can restore the data. And in the data lake and analytics space, as I said before, we work with VMware, for example, with the Greenplum solution to use Hyperstore as the data lake, and together with Greenplum, basically build a complex data analytics solution.
Which I believe you call Data Lakehouse as a Service, right?
Exactly. Yeah. This is the right terminology for this kind of solutions. And the workloads that at the end you can put on object storage is basically like, I think we can say that apart from VMs and databases, you can run any workload on object storage nowadays. And a lot of new solutions that pop up on the market, you will see them supporting object storage in some fashion. Even primary storages now support object storage to tier or save, for example, snapshots. So you can save the snapshot of your primary storage directly to object to have a secondary or third copy of your data to do to be your disaster recovery of the disaster recovery, let's say. And for example, these are the customers that chose the Cloudian solution today on the market. As you can see, we have a lot of interesting customers in the service provider space. And one thing that I like to say when I'm talking about this slide is typically that each vertical can also have its own integration with our storage. In the healthcare, for example, there are solutions like PACS that allow you to save medical data or medical images directly to object storage instead of using more expensive primary storage.
So you got to think about the real value here is, you know, object storage is pretty much a known quantity thanks to the hyperscalers. But here you're able to provide in data center, potentially completely isolated air-gapped object storage services with no egress charges, which customers would normally have to pay if they were using a hyperscaler. And with, all the functionality that you would want. It's really bringing that innovation into the data center. That's the way I see it.
Exactly. And in fact, some of these customers, specifically in the service provider space, sometimes like one of the markets that I cover is Eastern Europe, where AWS is still not there. They will never know if it will ever come with its own region. And they want to be the AWS of their own countries. And solutions like ours a solution like ours basically allows them to achieve this goal, which is, I think, a great goal at the end.
Yeah, I agree.
So talking now about capabilities in general of our Hyperstore solution. So our object storage solution is really simple. It's based on standard x64 or 86 servers, basically. We just require you a specific kind of CPU, some amount of RAM, 2 NVMe drives, and a bunch of HDD drives, and you're good to go. And starting with 3 nodes, we can go up to basically the tested limit is 200, but like there is no theoretical limit to our solution in the number of nodes that you can have in a single object storage solution. The cluster that we build at the end, we call it, it's set up as a peer-to-peer mesh. So any node is basically, is not a master in the infrastructure. So there is no single point of failure. You can lose whatever node and the infrastructure will still be able to run. And depending on your data protection policies, basically you can lose even a higher number of nodes and run in production without any impact. The point is also that being a cluster, it's highly difficult that your service will ever see disruption. Any maintenance operation, software updates, expansion, removal of nodes, these kind of operations do not require the service to go down to be unavailable. So you will always provide a highly available object storage service. The topologies that we support, basically we allow our customers to start with 3 nodes with RF3. From 5 nodes, you can start with erasure coding, or 6 nodes with erasure coding 4+2, which has a slightly better efficiency. And then we have, of course, multi-data center policies. The replicated erasure coding, where basically you're writing 2 replicas of the data, each protected with erasure coding in each site. And then you have the distributed erasure coding, where you're leveraging 3 data centers, writing 1 copy of the data, but that copy is fragmented and protected in 3 different sites. So you can lose 1 site and keep accessibility to your service and your data in the remaining 2 sites. On the data protection, which is basically the storage policies, is the way we define the topologies I said before. And this is another great advantage of our object storage solution, because we are the only ones that allow you to have multiple different ways to protect your data in the same cluster. So we do not hard code at cluster level how you will write your data, but it's set up at bucket level thanks to storage policies. And by listening to our customer feedbacks, one of the things that they wanted from these storage policies was basically to automatically manage if the data was getting ingested with replication or erasure coding, depending on the object side. We listened and we developed this feature that is basically called dynamic storage policies or hybrid storage policies. It will be released in our next major release that is called Hyperstore 7.5.1. So look out for that.
Hey, Giorgio, just a quick one, because that's a really important feature for service providers, right?
Yeah.
This has come about because of our service provider customers. I mean, often you as a CSP or a service provider, you just often don't know the data that's coming into you. So the fact that we have this policy, which is dynamic and actually can see if it's a large or small file, that really is a big deal to service providers and the efficiency of the cluster itself. So I just wanted to make that point, Giorgio.
Yeah, you actually helped me, and thank you very much for making this this statement. That's exactly the reason why we developed this.
Cool.
Talking about tiering, as I said in the introduction, basically any bucket can be set up to tier externally to any S3 target, but also to a specific target in Azure that is called in Azure Blob Storage, which uses Blob APIs instead of S3 APIs. So we support, let's say, any S3-based object storage in the cloud or on-premise, and also the Blob API of Azure to basically tier data to Azure. And the tiering is managed by lifecycle policy that you can also use if you want to, instead of tiering the data to another system, expire your data. So make them basically disappear from the system because you don't need them anymore. And another interesting feature of our object storage is basically the cross-system and cross-region replication. We renamed the cross-region replication to cross-system because technically with this feature, you can replicate a bucket of Cloudian into a bucket of AWS, for example. So you're not actually replicating data between two different regions, but you're replicating the data between two different systems. And the point of doing that, of course, is for disaster recovery. If you lose the source packet, your application can be mapped to the destination bucket, and you can still access your data that were replicated automatically by our system. I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on security. Of course, our security features involve the data immutability. We support S3 Object Lock, which now it will come together in the VMware VCPP licensing. So you will be able to set up buckets with immutability. We have, of course, data encryption with data encryption at rest and data encryption in flight. So the connection between your application to the system will be encrypted using TLS 1.2 and 1.3 with HTTPS, of course. And most importantly, the multi-tenancy, of course. So each tenant is basically its own island on our system. The data are always segregated, even between users of the same organization. And we allow our service provider customers to use quality of service policies that we will see afterwards to basically put what a user or an organization can do or can occupy on the same Hyperstore environment. But there is no component in our object storage that you need to dedicate to a specific tenant. So again, this is great because you have at the end a fully shared architecture where we guarantee you the segregation of the data.
Giorgio, just a point on that. Sorry to keep cutting across you, but
no.
I refer to this as technology fundamentals for secure shared cloud environments. You cannot run a storage service like this with multiple tenants and potentially multiple service lines and applications without those technology fundamentals. Secure multi-tenancy and quality of service in the billing engine are those fundamentals, and of course the security elements of it as well that you already talked about. So yeah, just making a point around that.
I agree, and I'm adding one to this one. Actually, one thing that I noticed, I've been working even in the past on service providers, and I'm actually in a service provider right now, one of our customers here in Italy, and the way our product is built for them, it's basically, for them, it's great. They like it, and they will see in other products instead when the multi-tenancy features or billing features or quality of service features are added afterwards. So they're not built in from the first release of the software. And this is where you will not build solid service providers oriented features. But in the case of Hyperstore, we built from version 1, basically, our multi-tenancy backbone. So any customer will find the features that are needed to build a complex service on our infrastructure. And closing up with the capabilities of our solution, we want to talk about immutability, and specifically immutability in a specific use case with Veeam. So with VBR 12, with Veeam Backup Replication 12, you are basically able to store all of your backups in the performance tier or in the capacity tier in Cloudian. So you will define as OBR, a scale-out backup repository. Hyperstore now with version 12 can be used as performance tier 2, so you don't need anymore to use a tier that wasn't object storage before. You can directly use object storage in the first tier, and you can directly enable in that first tier immutability for your data. So all of your backups are going to be saved in an immutable way. So if any attacker comes and tries to manipulate the data, they will be not able to do anything to your data because they're immutable, and the immutability is basically managed directly by Veeam. When you back up, the Veeam will add the immutability retention time, and for that time, the data will be locked. The lock will be... Yes.
Sorry, that's turned on for every tenant. Is it for every tenant bucket? Or is it for a whole tenant?
For any bucket in the infrastructure, basically. So in a multi-tenancy environment, for example, each tenant can be, you can sell basically the integration to Veeam with a single bucket to that tenant.
Right.
Okay. So in a segregated way again. And you simply enable, and actually you can also use of course, the Veeam VCD plugin to manage the backup jobs and check the restore points basically, and the backups will be stored on our object storage.
So you basically, from a service provider's perspective, then you're using VCD, you're using the plugin from Veeam, so it kind of looks and feels and integrates with VCD, and then in Veeam, you're able to see the object storage buckets directly as available targets for backup to, and turn on immutability on those. And also within VCD, you got the Cloudian integration via the object storage.
Exactly.
So you can create the buckets for the tenants, turn on immutability, and then they're presented up to Veeam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With the object storage extension, actually, you can directly, as you said, create the buckets and create them with immutability, because the object storage extension has now this capability, let's say.
Yeah,
awesome.
It becomes it's the management interface at that point, Guy, around VCD. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do it, but you're right. The simplest way of doing it is via VCD. Hey, Giorgio, just one really important comment on this slide. Immutability is obviously a serious subject around ransomware protection. But again, Cloudian, listening to our service provider customers, there are different ways to do object lock. And one really important way in which we're able to do it is in what we call compatibility mode. And compatibility mode is almost like a get out of jail card for service providers, where perhaps a customer has, I don't know, they've gone bust, or they've stopped paying, or for whatever reason, they've got data stuck in their systems. Well, compatibility mode allows our service providers, via a process, you can't just go and delete data, of course, but via a process, to actually remove that data should a situation occur where a customer stops paying or doesn't exist anymore. It's something unique to Cloudian. It's something that we talk to our service providers about. And the reason why the feature exists is because of service providers. So ability to kind of get yourself out of jail, because the other way of doing it is if you lock your data in an object lock for an X period of time, you're stuck with that data. That's governance mode.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a really good point, John. Really good point. Yeah. So you can clear up for, you've got the ability to clean up if you need it.
Yeah.
Should you have a situation like a non-paying customer?
Yeah, totally. And I say there's a whole process behind that, but you have a way in which you can free up storage space which is not being paid for.
Yeah. 100%.
So, Giorgio, carry on, Giorgio.
Okay, thank you. So basically, now let's focus a bit on the multi-tenancy features that Cloudian Hyperstore provides out of the box. So our multi-tenancy is going to basically it's going to create you can create groups and users inside our infrastructure. Each own group, we can also call it tenant. So it's basically a tenant on our system, and then you can define users inside this tenant. And each own user will have its own access, basically, and they're going to be divided into different groups. And as a group administrator or as a tenant administrator, you can manage your own users if you want to. You can add or remove users. You can manage quotas for your users. So the quality of service is really granular. The service provider has its own quality of service, but then the tenant has its own too. They can further segregate resources, basically. And then another point to the multi-tenancy features is that each own tenant is capable, of course, to monitor what is happening in its organization, and each user is also able to monitor what is happening in its own user space. So you have to think about a single user of an Hyperstore infrastructure to be like you going on AWS and creating your own S3 resources. It's basically the same experience. You will have your S3 root credentials where you can do everything with them. You will have IAM. We will cover it a bit afterwards, and that's the way it basically works. On the multi-tenancy, you can also, of course, we talked about before storage policies. You can assign storage policies specific to specific tenants. So at the end, you can sell to some tenants the platinum protection of the data in 2 data centers, replicated in 2 data centers or 3 data centers, and then you have the gold or the silver data protection that is just free replica, but in a single site, for example. So these are some of the ways that you can leverage the storage policies together with the multi-tenancy and together with basically selling different. It will create a solution that allows you to sell different service level agreements to your customers.
Giorgio, just take me through, sorry, just going back to the certificate the client-side certificate management and KMS support. How does that work with Cloud Director if you're using
At this moment, the KMS support we provide is per single storage policy, but it supports only AWS KMS. So the KMS, the external KMS can only be AWS at this moment, so the AWS service. But from version 7.5.1, which will come around May, we will have basically support of the KMAP protocol. So any KMS system will be able to be integrated in our solution.
Right.
And you can map it at storage policy level again. And so any data that will be uploaded in buckets created with this storage policy will be encrypted with an external key management system, basically.
Right. Is it KMIT 1.0 or later than that? Do you know?
I think it's later, but I would have to check, actually.
Okay. No problem. That's good to know. Okay, so there is, because security is like one of the key kind of concerns for partners, especially in sovereign cloud or in isolated, specific verticals. And having all the security around the hyperstore is great, but actually having that security into the bucket access as well is something that's going to be needed. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, this is, let's say, basically encryption in S3 is all you can encrypt data by using specific S3 APIs, and you have different methods of encrypting the data. But if your client or your end user is not enabling encryption in the client, you can enforce encryption from our storage policies. You can set up that, for example, that by default, each data that it's uploaded in a specific storage policy will be server-side encrypted. So the data on the disks is encrypted. The keys are kept, of course, on the system. More secure. You want more security? We go back to what we said before. So you integrate the solution with an external KMS, basically. Yeah. And going further into the multi-tenancy, as I said before, let's say you have different roles on the system. You have the user, the end user of the platform. You have the group admin that is basically the admin of the tenant or of the group, and it's able to manage users, setting quality of service at users level. And then you have the system administrator, which basically manages the hyperstore installation. It can see data centers, nodes, you can decommission nodes, you can add nodes, add data centers, add regions, and basically it's the maintenance console. But it's the same console that the end users use. It's simply a different access. And we call this console the CMC, and the CMC is also able, of course, to act as an S3 client to you to upload data or download data. So one view is missing here, which is users going in via Cloud Director would go in. Yeah, exactly. We have it afterwards with the OZA. Yeah, but in the integration, what is cool right now is that you can define new tenants that are matched to vOrgs on vCloud, but you can also remap existing tenants to existing vOrgs in BCD. Before, you had the capability only to create a new group. Now you can remap an existing group, which is cool because maybe like your customer, you were selling to your customer only storage as a service, and you never needed to give them the vCloud GUI, but you could have given them only the CMC GUI, basically. Now with the OZA, you can make, let's say, reuse what you had before and map it to a new V organization, for example. Right, cool. And talking about multi-tenancy, again, of course, we support authentication through LDAP or AD external system on the CMC if you want to. And more specifically, also, we support IAM, which is an important, this is why when I talk about object storage now, I try to change the way I talk about it in an ecosystem, in an DS3 ecosystem, because the point is that you are actually, when you use the S3 API in the cloud, you're not using only the S3 API, but you're using more than that. You're using maybe the IAM API, you're using SQS, STS, and these are all APIs that from Cloudian Hyperstore are available. And the structure of our IAM service basically mimics the structure of the service in the cloud. You have managed policies, you have inline policies, you can define
users groups, users, and at the end, an Hyperstore user, as I said before, can actually create an additional multi-tenancy underneath thanks to IAM if they want to. So this is the potential of the AWS, of the IAM, of our IAM service.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is controlled, of course, thanks to our quality of service policies. You can quote by storage bytes, storage objects, requests per minute, inbound bytes per minute, and outbound bytes per minute. So you can set up all these different policies to quote your users and what they can do. And most importantly, you can also bill your end users on what they do on the service. And our billing engine is actually, if you want, as a customer, I don't suggest it, but as a customer, if you want, you can recreate a complex billing like the AWS one. After some amounts of requests, you start paying me, I wanna make you pay for the GET requests you do, and so on. But I don't think it's actually good for customers to do that, because at the end, let's say, to be competitive with Amazon, we have to avoid, for example, providing
complex bills.
Yeah, the egress cost, exactly. So typically what wins is the flat cost based on storage, but it's actually cool maybe to run promotions. You can say like the first terabyte is free, and after that terabyte, you will pay me an amount of money. And you can build this complex billing environment with our solution. And furthermore, now you can also integrate it with the vRealize operations. So you can basically define, you can take the organizations on vCloud and build them based upon the billing of Cloudian, and of course, build them based on of their usage of the Cloudian service on the VMware Cloud Director infrastructure. And this, at the end, of course, you're able to use it with the VMware chargeback integration. Yes. So you can basically bill your customers at organization level, and the bills can be provided directly to the tenants.
Nice.
And of course, in the VMware cloud infrastructure, we can create the complex sovereign services together with the object storage integration, the Hyperstore object storage, and now together in that slide with Veeam 2, with the Veeam plugin for vCloud Director. And basically, you can create storage as a service, data protection as a service together with Veeam, ransomware as a service, and archive and DR as a service if you want to. And I know that actually in the roadmap of the object storage extension, for Cloudian, there's a story around the DR as a service of your vCloud infrastructure, but I'm not going to spoil the news, let's say. I will wait for the next release of the object storage extension to see this in action. So we talked about our solution and why it's great. Let's talk about how you can deploy it and how you can put it in your data center. So first of all, Cloudian provides many softwares. We have the Hyperstore object storage solution, which is what we talked about so far. And then we have two solutions that work together with our Hyperstore object storage. The first one is the HyperBalance, which allows you to have load balancing. The point is that our object storage infrastructure needs a load balancer, and we typically prefer to, or we always suggested our customer to reuse maybe what they had, and they can still do it. If they want to use their own load balancer, they can do it. But if they want a dedicated load balancer, they can also buy and deploy our HyperBalance solution, which would be directly supported by us. And then we have HyperIQ. basically our solution dedicated to monitoring the Hyperstore cluster. And we built it actually having in mind that if you have a SOC, for example, you want the people there to not have access to the entire Hyperstore object storage, but maybe just to data that allow them to understand if there's any issue, and then ask the specific operation people to fix the issues. So the IQ solution is built around that. And in the new licensing that will come, let's say with the VMware, customers will have access to the HyperIQ Enterprise, which allows them to monitor the S3 traffic. You can see basically what is going on, which is the packet that add more requests this week, for example, or in a specific period of time. And in this way, you can also understand how your end users are using your service. This specific family of features in HyperIQ were built looking at cloud service providers.
Yeah, it's a great option for upselling, additional services as a service provider. Once you've got visibility into bucket usage, enables you to have more of a conversation to your customer about, what's going on in those environments. Exactly.
Maybe you understand that for them, you would need to give them a dedicated cluster, or maybe you can deploy a new full-flash based object storage service because their application will benefit from that instead of running on your hard disk based object storage. So there are plenty of use of HyperIQ to actually do upselling to the end users.
Yeah.
And we are a software only company. So basically we allow you can buy our software. That box will come at your home with the CD disk drives inside. No, I'm joking, but let's say we can give you the software only for any of the solutions you saw before. HyperIQ, of course, is software based, but HyperBalance and HyperStore, they can come as software only. Or you can get our appliances. And I think also, let's say in the VMware relationship, customers can run the license from VMware, get the appliance from us, and the solution will still have end-to-end support. So they can contact us to get support on the software and the hardware, even if they took the software and the appliance not bundled, but separate, basically. And for our most demanding service provider customers, we also built two specific support contracts. One is Hypercare. Basically, it's like using an AWS service. We will do everything for you. You will just need to create S3 resources. But the maintenance, management of the solution, expansion, of course, we will not buy nodes for you, but we will wait for your heads up around that. But the point is that the solution will be fully supported. You need just to create resources and consume it. And then we have the Premier for customers where instead, like they want only monitoring, not like full management of the infrastructure. And we can guide you into best practices, into our best practices. And you will have also a dedicated support team member from our global team of support representatives. So, Guy, this I think was all. I don't know if you have any question
just one question, Giorgio, and just wondering, it's actually a couple of slides back, but you mentioned the load balancer, right? And
yeah,
one of the things I'm thinking in my mind is that cloud providers have Cloud Director, they have NSX, they have NSX Advanced Load Balancer. There's nothing specific about this load balancer, or is there, that ties it to Hyperstore, or can any load balancer be used?
It's really any load balancer can be used. Basically, with HyperBalance, the point is that it's basically install and forget. We install it for you. You forget about having it because you don't have to touch it anymore, because this is the way it is when you set up a load balancer for object storage. The only thing that Hyperbalance has more than other load balancer is an integration through in HyperIQ, basically. But that's all. The any load balancer, it's really great for us, and we have some customers using NSX T load balancers.
Brilliant. Good to know. Good to know. Well, I mean, look, there's significant new capability in this repackaging, John. You mentioned at the beginning. I think HyperIQ is going to be very interesting for partners to be able to kind of get further depth from what their customers are actually doing, and then align better solutions perhaps to them. So a nice solution to upsell through that kind of inclusive management capability. And just going back to the use cases, I see so much opportunity, not just for cloud providers in sovereign environments, but cloud providers managing, I don't know, like the police infrastructure and stuff, body cams, for example, transport and logistics. There's so much media out there and unstructured data that this is a perfect solution for, potentially longer term storage of that unstructured data.
You're totally right, Guy. I mean, literally, if an application is generating unstructured data, and we can think of millions of them, you've already mentioned one or two there, that data can live in a hyperstore world, obviously in a managed service provider data center or data centers. So, we just call out some kind of key use cases that we sell to, but very quickly, service providers understand that they can actually run multiple services, on this platform. If the application is generating unstructured data, it's a possibility it can the data can live on our platform.
Yeah. And just as a call to action with cloud providers now, they could, if they wanted to, start with a software appliance and then grow it and then replace that with a hyperstore when they're kind of confident that's the service they want. Is that, how do you see service providers engaging, John? Because obviously going for a commitment throughout may be trouble for some service providers.
Yeah, no, totally. So look, most of the time people build these clusters on bare metal. So, you can't get away from hardware. Very often, if people are POCing in virtual labs, of course, they're building them on their in their VM environment. And people do roll that out to start with. But realistically, when the business case is in place and the anchor accounts are there, people build these clusters based on whatever x86, x64, 64 hardware that they might be running, and that might be white box, or it could be HP, Dell, you name it. It doesn't really matter. So that's what we see, but it's very, very flexible. You can start small, of course. I mean, obviously in the product usage guide, there are some minimum commitments in there and so on. But that's one of the things that I talked about right at the very start, Guy, in terms of this sort of repackaging and just giving a bit more flexibility around, capacity commitments and additional discounts to what you commit to, and also that added value software we talked about, like HyperIQ and Object Lock. I mean, finally, on Object Lock, by the way, many of your CSPs will be running backup services, of course, if not all of them, of course. Exactly. And if they're not delivering, ransomware protection with Object Lock in place, then they really are missing a trick. And that message translates really nicely for their sales teams to take to their customers. They really do need an immutable copy of their data for all sorts of different reasons. If nothing else, cyber insurance, which is another subject, I know, but it is quite an easy thing for us to convey the message and actually get out to the service provider sales teams to go out to their customers and say they really do need a worm copy of their data somewhere in their environment.
Yeah, I mean, this is so if you're like an existing Veeam customer today, then you can look at you could use Veeam as it is, but then you might need to upgrade to 12 to have that integrated Object Lock SBR available in the VCD UI. But this is a simple plug-in on top of your existing backup solution. Yeah,
totally. And you can sell it obviously as a separate line item, a new revenue stream, essentially, ransomware as a service on top of perhaps your simple VBR and maybe Office 365 or whatever else you might be offering, Cloud Connect, for example. Ransomware protection is one of the biggest drivers we've seen over the last sort of three or 4 years. And Veeam's very strong in this space, as we know, of course. They've got a big cloud program themselves, and many of the people listening to this today will probably have Veeam in their environment. environment. And we're tight with that product, really tight with it. We're all in with version 12, but actually we've been working with them for years previous to that. And we have some enormous customers with them. So we've learned a lot about how Veeam deals with object technology, good and bad. So yeah, no, all over version 12, and our integration points around the SOS API that they have, and the key management they have, and actually being able to essentially deploy it through Veeam, and also VCD being in the middle of it, coordinating everything. So it's a good story. It's a good three-way story.
Excellent. All right, gents, thank you very much for today. Giorgio, thanks a lot for walking us through this presentation and explaining all the new kind of capabilities and features. And John, the advice to our cloud providers there is reach out to your business development manager. They'll put you in contact with the Cloudian team, have the conversation. There's new stuff coming. You're being flexible in your approach, which is really nice. It presents a fantastic opportunity to, like you say, just even a ransomware use case, just upsell and bolt on to additional services, and then grow so many more potential revenue streams from there.
Yep, absolutely, Guy.
Thanks a lot, chaps.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cheers, guys. See you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.